Hello, hello. We're here with Mr. Paul Umbach, who is a good buddy of mine, before I go into his prolific career that he's had so far, I would say that anything that I've ever done musically, I owe much of it to this gentleman sitting across from me. And he has gone through many different lives in the music industry, starting out as an engineer and then moving into production, working. We grew up in Long Island, so then he moved into New York City and did some production for Jive Records back in the glory days with good old Max Martin and Britney and Timberlake and all those guys. And then his next life was writing jingles, and then his now current life in Nashville, doing a really cool job that we'll get to at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, I wanted to start out, I've known you for many years, so I know a lot of stories and stuff like that. And I think one of the coolest stories that you have told, and one of the people that matters most in your life, I figured that might be a good place to start about why you kind of got into music and got into writing. And a singer-songwriter that you always kind of fall back on that kind of changed your life. Would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah, well, my life as a musician kind of started with my dad and my mom. Music was always, in the house. There was always a lot of vinyl being played, and they kind of gravitated towards folk pop artists at the time. My dad loved Phil Oakes and, Woody Guthrie and John Prine. He introduced me to him. But he also, Gordon Lightfoot, a lot of the 70s artists.
Good old Canadian.
Exactly, right? Jim Croce, and then a gentleman named Harry Chapin, who is a Long Islander, and people mostly know Harry through a song called Cats in the Cradle, and he's had many songs, and Taxi was another great one. So we listened to his music kind of all the time, and so I got a chance to really absorb his songwriting and his storytelling, and it was an incredible start to your life. I feel as a young musician, or just a want, like you want to grab music, you want to kind of suck, bring it in when you're younger. It's just it kind of.
Were you drawn to him over all of the other ones, mostly, or do you feel like it was kind of a level playing field?
Yeah, I kind of felt the production actually end of things, because there was a sort of a dramatic aspect to some of the productions that he did that were very using the instruments as to enhance the lyric. So I learned a lot of things through some of those early records, and there was a cello involved. There was bass, drums, guitar, and then acoustic guitar and a singer, and. I think he was the first concert I ever saw.
Nice.
I kind of don't remember some of those things, but we would always go to see him perform. He did countless amount of benefits for his organization that he had called World Hunger Year. It's still around. It's still doing well. And so we were always seeing him do his live thing as well, which was just tremendous. His energy that he brought to the stage was, better than for a singer-songwriter. It was just incredible.
Yeah, compared to some of the other ones, I'd imagine. They just kind of stand up there and sing their songs. So
yeah.
As a kid, to see somebody like that singing those great songs, but also running around and probably doing his thing.
Just it's all right. He'd always have his fist in the air and fist in the air, and just sort of he's always kind of not disheveled, but just into it. Just you could feel his passion about. His music, his audience, and his band. Because his band did, oh boy, I don't know the number, but I would say somewhere between 200 dates a year, probably even more than that, and just most of it for benefit.
Wow.
Harry was that kind of guy. Yeah, cut to the chase. It's definitely a definite. He's a defining figure in my life for many other reasons. So in that. When I was younger, I kind of could play some of his songs on guitar. Like I'm looking younger, like around 6, 7, 8 years old. Probably 7 and 8 when I started really playing more. And then I kind of got sick. I had a kidney issue that I had to get fixed. And so I was in New York University Hospital and had, gone through everything went well. And my grandmother had sent an a request for an autograph picture or something, some kind of correspondence to two of my favorite people at that point. And one was Harry Chapin. Mm-hmm. And the other was Dave Kingman from the Mets, who was a home run hitter, like a big guy, and never heard from Dave.
Yeah.
Which is fine. But Harry calls the hospital up and says, I got this letter and it says that you know my music and you can play some songs for me, and I'd really like to meet you, kind of thing, in a nutshell. And I was in recovery at that point, so
And Harry was at the height of his
1976. So he was right in the middle of almost everything. He was a political activist, and he was, he wanted to make a difference in the world. Yeah, certainly with world hunger, and he had the success with Cats in the Cradle and everything, and he was on tour constantly. Mm-hmm. So I believe it was in the morning, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and we got. The nurses in the hospital were kind of, really excited. And all of a sudden, the doors of the elevator open, and it was him. It was like, gosh, I'm 8. I'm sitting there. Oh my, my mother and my dad were. My mother was over the moon, and I remember he had his brown case, like a satchel of a bunch of things. So he gave that to me, and then talked to my parents and said, you guys okay financially? Are you guys everything? That was the first thing he said. Wow. And just his aura, his presence was unlike any other human being I've met or probably will meet. Mm-hmm. It was just incredible. So we sat down there in the lobby, and there were two wings. There was a younger wing on the right side, and an older teen wing on the left side. But that's where the rec room was. And so we get everybody together, and he plays like a 5 or 6 song concert in the rec room for everybody. I mean, it's a long story,
one song
but
and get out. It's like he put on like a show.
Yeah, he did. Wow. Yeah, and he did a bunch of his tunes, and I sat right next to him, and he played this old Sears guitar that was like my first guitar that I got that I used to play around with, and took pictures with people, signed autographs, gave his love, he gave his energy, which was the most important thing.
Talk about a life-altering event at that age. Oh my goodness. Yeah,
for somebody that it was he was famous, but it was just more the human power, the human energy, the human element that he brought to the table. He really cared a lot.
Sounded like he's a very genuine human being from what it's just
he was on 150% like all the time.
Wow.
And that's what we heard about him with the band, and I mean the stories it can go a long time, a long way.
I mean, how did
but it was definitely
did that? I mean, was there like that was the moment where you're like, okay, I want to do that, or I just want to do music, or were you just kind of overwhelmed by the moment, or just in general? Or?
I think because the moment occurred, we got a chance to see him perform more. We were always into his record. Yeah. I do feel that. Yeah, I do feel that. I think it's sort of confirming in a way. Mm-hmm. When you're on the right path, it confirms your identity a little bit, and that's what I feel it did to me. It made me want to play my guitar more. It made me want to, understand about songs, and again, like I said before, I was really drawn to the theatrical aspect of the music too. Just the way they used the instrumentation to enhance the lyric, which was really cool. So I really got into sort of listening on a production level early on.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I think that the thing, I mean, you do a lot of things really, really well. I mean, I think I always joke about everybody has superpowers, but I think your superpower is definitely in a production aspect, not only in dealing with artists and not only reading a band and getting them to, knowing when to push and all those kind of things, but it's interesting that when you're saying this back in the day, not you weren't just looking at him going, I want to play guitar and sing songs. You're like, well, I am looking at how the lyric is being serviced by the music around it. So your production, do you feel like production is the thing that you felt from the very beginning?
It's a great question. I think I was aware of it. Mm-hmm. I feel like, or it was because I listened to the music so much that I was like, he's got a song called Greyhound, and it's the cello part is is just feels like you're on a on a bus, or you
Yeah.
you're moving forward, and it's that energy that the instruments brought. When to follow up a little more with the story, when I was getting out of the hospital, the first thing he said, I got a concert, and I'd like for you to bring some friends, and it was at Brooklyn College of Music. And at the end of his show, he basically does a song called All My Life's a Circle, which is a beautiful song. Very simple, but just gorgeous. And he gets the cellist to finally come out and sing, and he gets the sound guy to come and sing.
Oh, wow.
Or sound people in it. And then he goes on this story, and this is pretty late at night, and he tells the story about I got a letter from a grandmother. I saw this little kid in the hospital, and he just got out. And Paul, you want to prove to everybody you can sing this song.
Oh, my gosh.
So I was, I ran up on stage, and I sat on his lap, and I don't recall, this is, unfortunately the age where there wasn't much video capturing like you have now, but I sang the song, I think I might set, I was a little overwhelmed, but I was looking back at the bass player, John Wallace, and I was looking at the drummer, and I was sort of very aware of the musicians on stage
and what they were doing around
and what they were doing.
Wow.
So I feel like that was another aspect of it. I was kind of more interested in that than being the front person,
mm-hmm.
Kind of saying, "Hey, here I am," But I really enjoyed jumping up on stage, and you just react at that point.
Yeah.
Now looking back on it, I'm like, oh, that's why I was reacting that way.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard. I mean, you hear a lot of stories as you go through the music industry about how people got into it and stuff like that. And I mean, I've known you for many years, and I've never heard that story.
Mm-hmm.
As far as that was where you first. I thought you fell into production coming out of doing the engineering thing and being in the studio, because that was your next step, right? You started messing around back in the day in the garage and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think I came through it mostly as a musician person or a guitar player, because I also played drums in elementary school. You start mm-hmm. drums or after you record, and I was like, oh, I like the drums. So I was always fascinated about the drums.
Yeah.
And so I did do that during my senior high school years. Mm-hmm. So I definitely come from a musician thing first versus an engineering thing. Like I never went to school for engineering. There's plenty of great classes out there. I learned through Mix Magazine and EQ mm-hmm.
And what sounded good to your ears.
And then what sounded good, what would kind of like using kind of cheaper gear in order to emulate the stuff that was really great. Mm-hmm. So you almost learned what, if you used your ear properly and you sort of had good reference, like speaker or headphones, I used a lot of headphones, you got to know what you could do with certain microphones.
Mm-hmm. I think people, I mean, just as a side note from there, I think people, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but people can get definitely consumed with going out and spending the thousands and thousands of dollars on certain gear when all they could, really, they needed to spend hundreds and make sure that their music was good.
That's so true.
I mean, it's amazing what you can accomplish with such little thing. I mean, what does Bono sing into, a 57?
Yeah, 57 or SM7 or depends on if they're doing it live.
What's a 57? Like $100?
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, arguably one of the greatest rock singers of all time. So,
totally. And you can get a copy. The company pile, they're like $15. And I have it on my snare drum right now. It sounds cool. It sounds open. It doesn't have the transformer in it, so it's like they tell you buy it at 57 and take the transformer out, you'll get a different sound. Well, you could just go and buy that microphone for $15 if you want to.
Interesting.
But yeah.
And you've always been that way. I mean, ever since I've known you, it's fascinating and you've always preached, the musicianship is what it is, capturing that musicianship. And I know we can get into this story, but the other thing too is that I've learned from you is always capture every single take.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah. Try to keep it running. That's an old school thing.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like, you learn that. I think you learn that. I learned it through reading a lot, but then always like, that's the job. That's your job as an engineer, is if you could afford the tape at that point,
back in the day.
You had to sort of make sure you captured like the takes. Mm-hmm. I think back also when tape was around, you actually couldn't keep takes, so you really had to make decisions
because you were bouncing down, right?
But you have to be ready for that.
Yeah.
And as long as then you're working together with the musician or the singer or whoever is on there, I mean, we had to punch in, so we always had to have a dialogue back and forth. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't be able to say, just do another one. I'll fix it. I'll figure it out. You had to have a working dialogue with the musician on overdubs or anything, and that was cool.
Do you feel like, I know we're getting off on a tangent on this, but do you feel, which is fine. I mean, do you feel like things? I know back when you had that situation where you had that dialogue and you had that connection and you had, I think all great things are created inside of a box. You have to have limitations.
Yeah.
And the size of your box that you exist inside of is, first of all, it's up to you. And that goes for whether you want to sit down and write a song about a specific topic or whatever, to where you're in your garage and your box is, you have 2 microphones, a Tascam tape recorder or whatever, and a drum set. And it's like, well, how do I make a record out of this? Do you think that these days there's just too many options? Like people can get overwhelmed by that?
I do, yeah. And certain aspects have become a lot easier.
Easier, yeah.
I mean, obviously, being able to record on a hard drive and the way the programs sound now, it's ridiculous how good it sounds. So you really, at least, you're not limited by the quality of what you're recording to.
So when you're back in Long Island and you're working on your engineering and you're building up your rigs and your things that work, what if you could fast forward and grab something from today? Obviously, it would be a hard drive situation and the program and stuff like that. Are there things that you miss about those days that you don't see people have the access to now?
Well, it goes back to exactly what you said. Limitations will open up will make you be able to create outside those limitations. Maybe I don't know how philosophy you want to look at it, or the visual that you want to look at it. I like the box idea, what you're saying, but it basically, if you just have a certain amount of tools, your art can you can focus on the art more. And I think that was a great statement that you said.
Do you feel like people are less focused on the art?
I think there's more. It almost, some of the pop productions are out of control. They're amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds like somebody's sitting down with the devices and creating all these incredible vocal effects and these drum beats and all that kind of stuff. So it's just the product of this. There's creative people all the time. So it's just a product of the machine. There's everybody now has about the same amount of stuff, but you definitely will see the cream rise to the top on keeping that machine really not just a tape machine, but wow, it's a tool, it's a device that you can have fun with. Yeah. I think the simplicity thing is there, and I as a creative person, I feel like I kind of I think I just emulated the sounds. I tried to emulate the sounds of the big records, and
was Mix Magazine out so you could hear like what the latest records was recorded on? Or
they would talk about it, and I was fascinated by all that. I was fascinated by studios and the environment of creating things. So every place I've ever lived, I've had a fairly decent place to record music, and a lot of people that are our age or my generation or that kind of thing got really into recording because it was something. Wow, the home recording thing, you could do it, but I do feel like the limited amount. I saw a post by a producer friend of mine who's wonderful. His name is Matt Wallace, and there was like this little post that he talked about where he didn't have a lot to work with doing the Faith No More record. He had very basic things. There was like 2 guitars, a bass, drum set, a microphone, and then great talent. And so I think it's great to have like 15 guitars or 15 Strats, maybe, if you're into that, or I got a microphone fetish. I have probably way too many microphones for what I do right now.
Some of them you have 2.
Yeah, and I love it. I love that. Maybe it's just one of those things that I probably have too many, but at some point I used to record a lot of bands and do that, so I didn't really get rid of that stuff. And maybe down the road I will use them again on that kind of level. But I do. That's my little thing.
Yeah.
I do have a lot of tools. I mean, over the years you gain. I have one Veach, I have a Strat, a Tele. I have my guitars, and I have a drum set up in my room. the studio I have right now kind of resembles something that I had when I was younger.
Nice.
It's in about the same amount of space. It looks very similar in a lot of ways. I would hang microphones from the ceiling, and they might be Sony electrolyte condensers that take batteries, but they always sounded really good.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the key. They sounded really good.
Yeah, and I think that wonder, it was great to go through recording studios and have the big consoles and everything else, but there are a lot of studios in New York and a lot of places here and all over the world that it just it's just there for a picture, or it's just there to, it's more there for sometimes a status symbol of sorts.
Yeah.
And I always got a kick out of trying to beat recordings that were made in bigger studios, especially on Long Island, and just try to see if I can do it with limited amounts of stuff. I don't know if I was successful at it, but some of the stuff is, I might release like my old Porta Studio recordings and have fun with that.
What was that first studio called again? Porta Studio?
Oh, the Porta Studio, which is the Tascam 246.
Oh, that's okay.
That was the name of the thing. It was like a 6-channel with a cassette, and it ran at double speed and with DBX and all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
So that's where I cut my teeth, so to speak.
Oof, man. I hear so many stories about that, and then I hear stories about tape and cutting tape, and I'm in the session world all the time, and it's, man, I think about what it would take to do some of the things that we do, and how long it would take to do some of the things we do. I'm like, man, I don't know if I could do that. But if that's all the way I always come back to is if that's what you've always known, and if and then you just make sure you get it right the first time.
Yeah. I think you said, is there something that you we go on tangents, that's what we do. If there's something that you could bring back, is that limitation of this is the moment.
Yeah.
This is now you got to step it up. And just a little insight on how I used to do things. I did have a sequencer. I used like Master Tracks Pro for Commodore 160 or 128 or something like that. Or, there was Sequencer Plus. So I would have a sequencer and I'd have keyboards running. And a lot of times I would play drums, but I would have microphones on the drums. I'd have the sequencer going. I'd have a couple of mixers all attached to 2 tracks. And everything would go into the first 2 tracks in stereo. So your reverbs and everything. So your print would have to be spot on. Your mixing would have to be spot on because you're printing to almost live. But you have, the sequencer, and it's your performance on the drums, which is normally the live thing. So when I wasn't quite good enough, which I wasn't really, and when I got the professional guys, or some of my guys that have now do play professionally, and they would come in and play. One guy, Frank Modolaro, we would get together and sometimes I'd just play live keyboards and he'd play drums, and those would be the first 2 tracks, and they would always sound great because the energy was there. So
because you're going down together too.
Yeah, and you're going. So there had to be that moment. You had to get it right in that moment, and I think that's where it. That's something I miss from that. Yeah, from now it's that it's forcing yourself now to get into that moment. But it here it happens more, and the musicianship is fantastic, where you can get 5 songs done in 3 hours, and it really does sound good. But and they're forced to do it in that moment. So it's there. It's just
It's a bag of tricks sometimes, though, and that's the thing. It's like, I think that what you're trying to do, and as a producer, you could probably speak to this, but you're trying to get something unique and something different and pulling the best out of somebody. And when you have your box as your 3 hours and 5 songs, it's like, what is? I know. I understand. There's bags of tricks that we all have.
True.
Like the one thing that I'll always take from things that you've said, and advice you've given was, there's always beauty in the mistakes. And I started listening to music in that way. Like I can pinpoint, I can think of 2 or 3 off the top of my head of some of my favorite records where I'm waiting for the vocalist to miss something because I love that part. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that when you have your bag of tricks, there's executed so well that you go to that bag of tricks.
This is a great point. Yeah.
And I feel like if we had time, I was talking with Jim Hoke last week about this, where I was asking him what he misses, and the thing that he misses the most as well is when they were all in the room together trying to find something and be inspired by each other. And that's just such a rarity. I know there's session guys in Nashville that do that, as far as demo people or people that are playing on masters, but there is a time limit. You can't really explore, and you can't get those magic takes. you know.
Yeah.
So it has this kind of like vanilla-y kind of thing that always comes out of it. So yeah, it's interesting about how, I mean, it's so many people just have, it's become an overdub situation, you know.
Yep.
I wonder if they're just thinking about, you know, I think about a record like The Weeknd, which is exactly what you're saying. Like you dive into that, you know, as they're masterful pop tracks, but they're taking effects and they're using that as a tool to make music with it. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if these effects now are becoming instruments, you know, in the pop world, as opposed to just instruments being instruments, you know. I mean, they'll go through like 75 mix revisions, and
oh yeah,
I remember reading an article, and the guy was talking about what he did with this certain verb, and it took him a week to get this one verb and this one verse right. And I'm like, man, I don't have the patience for that.
Yeah,
I'd rather just play a guitar pass and get that right.
And that goes to your point though, because that takes time.
Yes.
And when you're in a studio and you're crunched for time, or the musicians need to go to the next session or something else, they don't have the time to put in. So the technology is allowing us to have the time.
Because you're not paying for a big studio, yeah, for sure, an engineer, and
yeah, and it has, but it's its own, you know, it's its own can of worms, I guess, so to speak, because you get so into what you can do with those tools. It's still an outlet. It's still a creative thing. So I don't personally. I think it's great. It's not a language. Yeah, no, I know. It's not a language that sometimes I'm right with you. If somebody asked me to do a pop track, because that's sort of my credits. You know, I got credits in the pop world, but that was 20 years ago, almost. And you're looking at, you know, we marveled at what the Swedes were doing, like what Max Martin and Rami were doing, and these people at Chiron, and their productions were really intense. They, at the same time, you know, we all sort of had the same gear, and they were just doing it more interestingly and better. It just felt like that way, but it was still rootsy. It wasn't a lot of flash. It wasn't a lot of manipulation to the audio. It was just arrangement ideas, things like almost thinking of it from an orchestral standpoint, with the big hits and some of the cymbal swells and the reverse stuff. Those bag of tricks that producers use, now that became the norm, and now it's like that vocal, you know, in the last few years, it's the Bieber vocal thing that everybody's kind of copying, and you know, I guess done through Melodyne and a couple other things. I mean, you always have to stay on it because the technology is allowing people to just be so super creative, and it's harder to understand where it's coming from, but it's still time. You know, they spend a long time doing these things.
So much.
You know,
I remember when I first heard, you know, you hear about all of these. I mean, Chainsmokers is a good example of a current version of it, but I remember when I first heard Owl City, and I read up about him, and he just like made that first record in his like, I don't know if it's his mom's basement, you know, like in the basement of his house. Like he just sat there and he came up with this beautiful record, but it is such a vocal manipulation, and it's just sounds that he he created these things, and he creates a sound for himself. Yeah, and he just did it in the box.
Yeah,
you know, and when we say in the box for non-musician people, it's like when you're in the box, you're in your computer. Nothing really exists outside of it. So you're doing everything. Everything is in your computer. You're not really using your hands. You're using MIDI, and you're using sequence and stuff like that. And it's a beautiful record. And his voice, to me, is what makes that beautiful. But even that is highly auto-tuned and highly manipulated. You know, that was the first time I was like, man, you can make a record like that in your mom's basement. And then the Chainsmokers, another great example. I mean, they're just living in their, you know, like another basement situation. They're shooting files back and forth, and they like changed pop music, you know, 2 years ago. So
and they were able to get a hit. You know, they were able to step out.
5 hits with the same chord progression. But
well, yeah, it's the music stays the same in a lot of ways. You really, when you start to analyze it, and I haven't done my due diligence on that, but if you really start to analyze it, you know, you have a much more wider theory background, and I always marvel at that, but it still comes down to 5/1 and
of course,
and a 4-chord sequence that usually has a minor in it, some form.
And their sequence was fresh and it was new. And
Yeah.
It wasn't happy, but then they put this stuff on top of it that kind of lifted you up. It was brilliant. I mean, it's like, how do you stumble upon that?
Yeah, I think you just open yourself up to the creativity, and that's the thing that I used to have. Yeah, as a kid you had more time. I think I mean you have more. If that's what your dedication is, you have more time to do those things, and
the patience for it.
The patience. Yeah, I mean it was. I always like going back to what we used to have sometimes, but and again the limitations thing. It definitely it definitely kind of forced you to get it to a place where you could. That's what you thought of. Like this is you kept striving to get to that. And I think right now it's like they're striving to make the most wicked, craziest things. That like how did you do that? With the stuttering or stuff that was in some of the other dance pop music of the day.
Until it gets out of style.
Until it gets out of style, yeah. It's fad. It is trendy and fad, but it's also the definition of then that's the way that music sounded for that time. And when you're inside it, you don't know it, but when you start looking back on it, you're like, oh yeah, that was that trick.
Well, let's talk about a master of that, because you work with him and you were in that world. So from, when you moved into New York City and you started working for Jive Records.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, probably the most prolific pop person in history his name is Max Martin, and he wrote all the Britney stuff, all the NSYNC stuff, the Backstreet Boys.
Early Backstreet songs.
Yeah,
too.
and then now he's progressed into Taylor Swift stuff. So he's had a huge, he's gone through metamorphosis. He's changed himself over years to continue to stay up on the trends. So when you were working with him back then, I was talking with Alex about production, and I was saying, I think it might have been a track that you had shown me where you listen to just an isolated part of the track of one of his productions, and you're like, man, that sounds like crap. But then in the context of it, if you take that piece away, it changes everything. And I'm wondering, how did you see him change? Have you seen him change, having worked with him over the years, to kind of change the way that he works to make sure that he stays up on trends and stuff like that?
Well, I'll definitely clarify something. I mean, I wish that I got a chance to sit in the studio with Max.
Yeah. He didn't come to the U.S. a lot, though, did he?
Not really.
Not really, yeah.
Our company worked for him, and he kind of worked with us, but he's just a highly intelligent and super talented songwriter, ideas person, and I wish I'd worked more closely with him. It was more like he would come in, and I had a room set up there, and his relationship was obviously more, I think, with like Steve Lunt and the people that were him and Clive Calder, and they would come into my little space that we had built for me at that point, which was great. It was a room in the A&R department, and had a bunch of gear. We had some nice speakers, and it was a comfortable environment to listen to. We had a nice couch, and so it was great. And I wish I got a chance to see the process a little bit more, because they always worked in Sweden and they worked over there. So he didn't really work a lot. But
he would fly the artists over to work with him over there when he was ready for them.
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So you got insights into it, but it's a little different. I didn't get a chance to really be a part of it as much, but when you're there every day, and we're kind of seeing it. I got a glimpse into it, and then you look at multi-tracks and you can kind of see, wow, that's some really wonderful work.
Yeah,
you knew there was a guy named BT that did some stuff for NSYNC, who's a trance artist, and his stuff was just immaculate, and another really clever, amazing producer, musician, as well as a person that used the technology to his advantage. I mean, he was always making really cool sounds. I know, another tangent, but yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, because I wish I worked a lot more closely with Max, but the way his I think he just always knew it was going to be good. He figured out some things, and I can only speculate what those things are, but it certainly starts with a title. This whole town's based on a title in Nashville. You take a song and you create something from a title, and generally speaking. I just think he does it better than most. He does it.
Would you say that he has a bag of tricks, or is everything kind of fresh and he's just always chasing something different, something new?
I think he just continues to recycle but
Some of the
in a
stuff,
good
okay.
in a way that's also keeps it really simple. He stays up on culture, I guess, and cultural events. I love to say hi and say hi to him again, and
Yeah.
say, well, wow, you were good,
Yeah.
but you're now beyond good. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have his figures as far as what the numbers of hit songs he's had.
He might
but
be the greatest of all time.
He might be bigger than McCartney and Lennon and McCartney. That's a big statement, but I say it just mostly from a standpoint of his output and what it's done to the culture he's in, and that's what he does. He adapted to the culture, either sonically or just "Shake It Off" would not be written. I'm sorry, it wouldn't be written in Nashville, and I don't think that lyric is not gonna. But the energy of it, he it's coming from a different perspective, and it's seemingly so simple and so basic, but it's the energy when you listen to the record. He understands records. I think that's his thing. It's a vision thing, and he learned a lot. He was a rock musician.
Yeah,
In the beginning, and he does great rock. He produces great heavy rock music too as well. So
it's kind of like what's the they're both equally great producers, but Max is in a league of his own. But Shania Twain's husband, ex-husband,
Mutt Lange.
Mutt Lange, him going from rock to that pop stuff. It's those tracks that he made for Shania, it's just like there's an energy in those that is undeniable.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you can get that energy out of building a track. But where does that? I mean, where did you find his energy in the tracks? Like, if you were to break down his production.
Well, you mean Max or
Max, sorry, Max. Back to Max.
I think just there's he has right hand men. He's got guys that I don't know the technical details, but I know there's a gentleman named Rami always playing with him, or just being
I
his
feel like he's got
main
this
producer.
complex of people in Sweden just running around.
It could be,
It's like the Google of pop music.
Yeah, it could be.
Like nap pods
he's wonderfully mercurial, I guess, but he's also, I think he's living in Los Angeles or something.
He is a real person, right?
He is a very real person. He's a very funny guy. I mean, he's super talented, super intelligent. And but as far as breaking down things, I kind of just it's taste, right? I mean, it's all based. All this stuff is kind of based on taste, and I could do that as somebody analyzing music. I like my taste factor, but it's my thing. It's not a popular one, maybe. But he knows the pop taste. He's always been a little bit of a step ahead. If you go back and people wanted to, when I was at Jive, people wanted to write songs like I Want It That Way, and quit playing games with my heart. In '95, after a really great era of grunge music and intense rock music and that kind of thing, and culture kind of shifted a little bit. We want more. We want something different, and this is even prior to all the sharing. So you still were able to sell records, and you still were able to make money at it. And around '95, he wrote some really great songs. Mm-hmm. So I think it stayed as solid songwriting, and but there was a feel and a taste. We used to talk about it because I think that they were, they were feeling they were making R&B-ish kind of records, but they're so pop driven that you'd get the feel of good R&B music, like you'd get that kind of roll a little bit, but it would be maybe a little more precise, so there was always a throwback to American music, but
that would have been like the
Swedish
Boyz II Men kind of era in the early 90s, right?
Mid 90s, like 95, 96, 97, somewhere around there.
I mean, I guess I remember when I was a kid, Boyz II Men had come out, and I feel like Backstreet and that was like 3 or 4 years after that. Am I wrong?
I think it was 95.
Okay,
I think Backstreet was kind of their thing, and now you're looking at 95, 96, and Millennium was 97 or something like that.
And that's really interesting because "Quit Playing Games with My Heart" is a great song, and it is very simple.
It's very simple.
Production-wise, it's compared to what he does now.
Yes.
I mean, you could strip that away and play that acoustically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You go back and listen to it, and it's just he's an amazing singer too. So he's a really so I feel like as a producer, it's really good to be able to articulate how to sing. Because if you look at, I mean, Mutt is a good singer as well, and always had vocals done. He sings on all those albums on Def Leppard.
Has he done all the BGVs and stuff like that?
He's done a lot of them, and they just layer back so singing is an expression. It's a human expression. So I do. And it's not mutually exclusive. I think Dylan was a great songwriter, but some people don't like his singing voice. But I feel like I think that helps in the pop world. I think it helps in production. I think you can kind of, if you express yourself through your singing, it definitely kind of puts the direction of the song in order, I guess.
Now, when you say that, are you saying? You're saying on the production side of it, like singing something to a musician, and then also obviously you're cutting a vocal, and you're like, no, can you bring it more to the front of your vocal, like that kind of stuff?
Yeah, some of that, yeah, and also just you understand harmony. When I thought, maybe that's so. There's some lead singers that don't, but I feel like no, there's. I mean, I think if I look at that, I think his stuff has always been vocal based in a lot of ways, and certainly that early Backstreet stuff. And it was perfect.
Dealing with 5 lead singers.
Yeah, and he would. I mean, I remember him saying something. I mean, it's like the Max Martin show right now. But it's interesting. I kind of, he isn't getting maybe the pop praise that some other people in the pop world have gotten. Yeah. But it was like, hey, I write these songs, and they don't want to see me doing it. They want to have Britney singing. They want to. But he can. He knew what that taste was. He knew what would probably work for that. And I feel like that's just being cultural. That's just kind of intelligence and culture comes into play, and there's an analytical point to it, and there's a cleverness to it, but it's also, and then you have to execute on top of it. Yeah. So you can know all of it, but you still have to get it done. And he's gotten it done over the years, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, jumping out of Jive, when you were at Jive with that kind of situation, because all the things that you're explaining about, specifically about singing, I mean, and vocals and stuff like that, it's like that's your bag. Like, that's the beautiful part of what you are. And it's interesting that coming out of that and kind of into your next foray of what you did in New York, like writing jingles, and that was back in the day when there was a good amount of money for jingle writing and stuff like that. And you would get campaigns for different things and stuff like that. Some of the artists that you work with Jive, specifically Matt White, who my favorite story that you've told me about him and about that situation was, so you had a song with him that you wrote called Love, which ended up being the song that I'm sure if everybody knows it if you were to hear it, and it became the song for the McRib commercial.
Oh yeah,
back in the day, But it's a beautiful record. I love that whole record, and I remember you telling me, going back to earlier when we were just talking, was always record the first take, because that vocal that ended up being the vocal that everybody knows and hears and has seen on the TV millions of times is the first vocal that he did for that particular song.
Yeah. I mean, there was, we didn't do a lot. Again, that might have been one of those necessities on time. It was just kind of had him come in and he had done like a little guitar demo of the song that he had, and I just kind of put a track together and had him come in and do his stuff and put his guitar on and play little piano parts and stuff like that, and then do the singing. And it was like, okay, we have a limited amount of time, let's do it. And you just kind of go back to the energy of that, and it was just right. It just felt right and connected to the song, and that's, I don't know, that's what you do. And he has a great tone to his voice, and super talented guy as well. And I really, when hearing his voice, I was like, okay, that's the kind of voice I'm looking for. And that was before, I mean, Gavin DeGraw's great too, but it was before him. It was, at that point, I was listening to Rufus Wainwright and Kate Bush and a bunch of other stuff prior to when I'd go into Jive and maybe have to do a pop track. I always like to sort of give myself some other musical thing to kind of bring into it and clear my mind a bit. But his voice was different than other people's at the time. So it was really I was curious, and so we did a bunch of stuff together. So yeah, it was cool.
Well, that's interesting to me, going back to where we talked about taste, because I literally had that same conversation with Alex in the last podcast where he was talking about his production process. which is a very fascinating thing to go back and listen to if anybody's interested. But the way that he attacks it is he attacks it from lyrics and stuff, and he finds commonalities in words that in the lyrics that an artist would have for a record. And then they sit down together once they trust each other, and then he wants to know taste-wise where he can take it and if they're a match kind of thing. And that's interesting to me because you're listening to a Kate Bush, you're listening to, these kind of singer-songwriters, and then you're coming in and you're writing pop tracks. I think that could work well because it could work in a place where your sound would be very different because you're shaping it with another outside kind of entity. But my favorite part, and I think some of the most success that you've had as far as that was concerned when you were working at Jive and after Jive, was when your taste kind of melded with some of the artists that were there, like Buddha Head, the other ones that never really got a chance to see the light of day. I mean, you made some beautiful records that just, it wasn't the right timing for that. But that was your taste. So it's almost like you were being this contrarian in this company that was like doing this pop stuff, and your heart was in this. So I'm super happy that you got a chance to work with a guy like Matt White, because you and him, that's the perfect combo from knowing you and knowing what you like, but it still had that pop flavor, which you've always had. You've always been very aware of molding a song that would work in a pop context.
Thanks. So
yeah, but it's and I feel bad like when I listen to your stories and I listen to going back, like you did make some beautiful records that really never got saw the light of day. And that's just the idea of a label and a major label in that situation. Did you find that frustrating at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there are some. I mean, it's a story that everybody, a lot of people, maybe in my position or songwriters, we can go, it was on the record and then it got dropped at the last minute. But yeah, we had full deals. I mean, there was some huge deals on the table at that point. Jive wasn't going to sign any of these artists, so I was just like, okay, like you said, and it wasn't totally my heart to be doing the pure pop stuff. My heart was still stayed with some kind of the next layer of that, but maintaining a sense of the pop world. But I was a prog rock guy. I love Genesis and Pink Floyd, and so I wanted to take, and Radiohead. I wanted to take that music and bring it into some of that regular pop.
And the irony of it is, the most success you had at Jive was "I Love Rock and Roll," the Britney Spears thing that you did.
Well,
right?
No, I just played guitar on that. That was Rodney.
Well, there you go. Yeah, you played the rock guitar.
Yeah. Well, they didn't want to pay. Was it Ronnie Bird or something? Yeah, whatever. No, they said that Paul could do it. And that was a great experience. I worked with Rodney Jerkins, and it was really interesting going down to Miami and just going to Criteria and there was a Marshall amp, and it was like, all right, plug into that and figure it out. And it's my little rendition of it. I mean, it is what it is. That's just me being maybe a musician, but and being able to adapt for that.
But timing and taste is an important thing.
I think
right?
so. Yeah. When I look back on some of the stuff that I was doing, I definitely was at my happiest creative point at that point, because the stuff I did with Buddha Head and we also wrote a bunch of songs together. Ramon's a really talented lyricist, and so we wrote a song called "This Could Be Everything," which is one of my pop songs that I have that's out there, and it's a good tune. And we worked together great, because he would take my mumblings and my little melodies and kind of a word here or there, and
I've been there. When you do that.
Yeah, and he would take them and he would just extrapolate the concept. And he would it's kind of interesting, kind of like maybe a little bit what you were saying about Alex, where he's takes a bunch of songs and tries to find the thread of the lyric that works with the artist, that kind of then ties in the big picture on a record, or maybe leading the artist down the right path.
Yeah.
I think that's when you have a good working relationship with an artist as a producer, is you really see who they are, but you have to go in and kind of define it a little bit. And at that point, we were doing that, and with Matt, it was more, he was just unbridled, and it was just, he just kind of just wanted to, just express himself constantly. And he's become a really prolific songwriter, and he's done a lot of work over the years. And, it was just a matter of, okay, that we had a similar taste, or I could pull some of that rock element and some of that progressive element, and then some of my pop elements, and try to put a little sauce together. And instead of copying, I couldn't do what what Max was doing and Rami and those guys were doing at that point. Was really appreciative of it, but I wasn't. I was going to try to, you try to create your own combination of what you think is good.
Yeah, which makes your listening experience unique. I mean, you have that prog rock mixed with Harry Chapin's simple folk songs. I mean, I think that's what's led to, I mean, your success when you listen to your songs. I mean, even specifically. So let's go into the next kind of big one that you had, which was, I mean, obviously working with Matt, but then you kind of moved into that world where you learned about jingles and you ended up working with a company.
Yeah.
And you were able to take all of those. You were able to use your production mind with your songwriting mind, with your voice and your ability to kind of capture an emotion. And you ended up getting a big Sears campaign with a song. You want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, that was really fun. It was there was a company that the gentleman named Richard Berg was running at the time, and it was called Garfish, and it was a jingle house, but it was really small. And he had worked with Gray Advertising at that point, and then he kind of branched off on his own thing. And one of my closest friends, Harold Stefan, kind of said, "Yeah, you want to give this a shot and write something for us, for this particular thing."
Was it? And this was specifically the campaign?
No, this was like early, like the introduction to it. So I wrote one thing. It was for like a toy commercial, something that was fun. It was a rock thing. And then the next one we got was they needed Huggies. Kimberly Clark needed a track. There were a bunch of babies with. It's kind of funny to think about, but with turntables, and they're sitting there with headphones on a stage, and they needed a pop track. Uh-huh. So then it was clear I already had that experience the prior 4 or 5 years. So we did I did a track called I guess Baby or whatever it was, but it was very NSYNC-y kind of thing, and it was fun. It was like, oh wow, and the more fun I think was, wow, I get paid for this. Yeah. And and it was all union, and I was a member of this, SAG, and I started to understand a little bit of the business. And
so you would go from a salary position working for a record label to a per kind of situation, landing these commercials.
Yeah. And then I had the independent artist that I worked with in between a lot of that. Like, it was Matt's record, because he was signed to a different label, and that's why I couldn't really stay at Jive. And then Buddhahead's record, but it was like there was an in-between time. But then it was like, all right, I'm not now working for anybody. I need to, let me try this. Mm-hmm. And so that was the good, I guess, a good motivator, and putting all of those things together. So yeah, I did one, didn't fly. The second one I did was a national ad. Mm-hmm. So I produced
that was the Baby one.
Right? Yeah, produced this, wrote the track, did the song, produced it, did the vocals. The third one I did was a national, which was for SpaghettiOs, which we did a new theme song, which was a really cute song. And then the company was getting a nice little run to it because the other guys were doing great too in other areas. And so it was nice to have, first, like, 2 out of the 3 were Screen Actors Guild money for singing, which was brilliant. Yeah. And having something I composed to be on rotation all the time. Yeah. A lot of soap operas, it would be playing constantly, Yeah. And then the third one we did was really it was a, what do you call those casting calls? Not a casting call, but the things they would throw out now.
Cattle calls.
Cattle calls. Yeah, there you go. Thanks.
Yeah, cattle calls. Love those things.
I'm out of the business. No, not. But no, the jingle business has changed again. But so is everything.
Yeah. Can you do this for free? Can you spend your entire day writing something for free?
For nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least there was structure to it.
Yes.
And
you had some respect because you had success in the past. Yeah. So it was probably a higher end cattle call for sure.
Yeah. This one was. I mean, it was all the top jingle companies in New York and Chicago. It was run by Ogilvy and Mather, which were based out of Chicago, and so Sears was looking to try to compete with their companies, and we're looking at 2004 or 5, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. Now they're not doing very well, but no. And a lot of businesses are struggling a little bit, but they just wanted something that was, and they just said it's got to be the good life. So everybody. I mean, there was probably hundreds of pieces of music that they would have to come to, but they were kind of specific about, we wanted a little Americana, but we wanted hip, and we wanted kind of, something that could work
Did you know the concept of it at all? Like, I know Ty Pennington was really hot at the time, and he was involved.
I don't know if he was. No, I don't think in the initial part of the creativity. I think they might have said they have a spokesperson, but I can't recall.
Did they give you an emotion at all?
Just no.
No, just write something that's hip and
it's got to, jingles and in general have to have a bit of pep and hype, or a little bit more excitement, and but yeah, it was one of those things where it was they don't really give you a lot, but they're trying to define what they're looking for too.
Yeah.
But the Americana thing was important, and hip. What's hip? It's rhythm in a lot of ways, and how you do the rhythm and what you do choose to make it kind of interesting. I think that's the way I looked at it, the way I interpreted it. And really, the thing that was interesting is that I got this request when I was out in Los Angeles working, I think, on Matt White's record, and I had worked with a musician that just to this day just was one of the first musicians that would make me really just like well up when I listened to him play, and it was incredible. And he played pedal steel on some of Matt White's songs, and his name is Greg Lees.
Yes,
and Greg
talked about him with Jim Hoke. Yeah.
Oh gosh, what an amazing human being and a lovely man.
Wasn't it a Matt White? On another quick tangent. Wasn't it a Matt White track when you were sitting in the studio?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
We were in we were in the control room at in Jimmy Iovine's studio at Interscope, and we were just doing some overdubs and some like little taste things on some of the records, and we were just, hey, plug this thing in. We got the sound and everything, and no chart, no. Just listened to the song and played as he reacted to things. He had played. He actually, I'll have to say, I mean, he was the session guitarist on the session too, which we did at Henson. And when you were talking about having at that time in like 2004, 2005, guys were doing a lot of overdubs in certain studios, and so the musicians that we had to work with, they were all amazing. They were like, oh, we haven't done this in ages. This is great. We're sitting in a live studio, and we're in a big room together, and we're just, we got a drummer here, and a bass player here, and a guitarist there, and a keyboard player here, and they were all just awesome. I mean, Brian McLeod was our drummer, who I become friends with at that point, and he's an awesome dude. Paul Bushnell, who plays with Tim McGraw, and he does a lot of live stuff, and that combo was really great because they really worked well together. Greg Lees on guitar and Ben Montench on keyboards. I mean, you can't not have more better.
That's a good day.
Better musicians, and also just humans, just fantastic, top-notch human beings, interesting human beings.
Yes.
And just really great people. And they shaped that. And I was sort of I'm the songwriter on some of these songs, and then kind of came in. And Tom Panunzio and I were kind of co-producing it together. But I know we went on a little bit of a tangent.
That's fine. I love it. Set it up, man.
But it's that kind of it was that kind of thing. And then when we did the overdub sessions, I had to go back. I got this call to do. We had to write something for Sears. Well, I was just super inspired by Greg, and I think I picked up when I started doing the track. I said, well, it's got to have slide on it. It's got to have some kind of slide. And I'm not a slide guitar player at all. I'm not good at all. But it was, okay, that's going to be an element that's going to be in this. So I took an XLR adapter, for 1/4 inch to XLR adapter, and I played the slide part on the song, and it just sort of slippery in a good way. And I think that was part of that Americana element that came to the track. And so you kind of mixed a bunch of different things, and ultimately it was, it was picked. So out of those things, and we, it was just, you're in the moment, I think, and being inspired by the musicians that I had that inspiration to then bring that to the
to kind of reflect back
to the music.
That.
Yeah.
So I remember you told me about that song. You told me about every artist has the moment where they hear themselves on the radio or something
Mm-hmm.
like that moment, you know, that everybody shares. I remember you told me the story when you first saw that on TV. You want to tell me that?
Yeah. Well, it was just getting ready for work or getting ready for the morning.
And what were you working? You weren't
actually
working
wasn't.
at Jive
I wasn't
anymore,
working at Jive, but it was, you know, getting ready to get up and do stuff, and you know, it was. I don't know, I was in the bathroom and the TV was on. It was like all of a sudden it was like, "This is the good life, and it is everything it seems." And it was just, you know, oh wow, there it is. And it has a lot of energy.
Yeah.
You know, it popped out of the speaker, and it was, you know, and then Ty Pennington's running around the store, whatever.
He doesn't have any energy.
He has no energy whatsoever. So he had to compete with that.
Yeah,
you know, so they needed a song that actually could get that didn't totally compete. It stayed sort of below his energy, but then popped out when it needed to pop out.
Yeah.
So. And it was just a good little hook. So it's unfortunate you can't really find it much online. I don't even know if it's, you know, out there, but
I think I might have found it on YouTube at one point.
Okay.
But yeah, Good Life.
Yeah, it was The Good Life.
Beautiful song. I love the song.
Yeah, and it was fun to put together. It's super simple, but you know, and just kind of vibey, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that was just taken from that experience with those musicians and my LA thing that I was doing at the time.
I think I know the answer, but I'm curious because I had this conversation with Emily, and we were talking about finding like a feeling of when you have success in something, and a feeling of either satisfaction or like the different energies that come from behind that. So like I can imagine if somebody wrote a really passionate piece of music and heard it on the radio and it meant a lot to them, that would be different than them chasing somebody else's vision and hearing it on the radio. So I use an example of, I also had that experience where I turned on the television and I was about to watch Jimmy Fallon, and I heard my voice and saw my piece of music, you know, on a commercial. And then I've also had the experience of watching a television show, listening to my song that means the most out of anything that I've ever written, being played back through the speakers in an emotional piece of this film. Now, both paid very, very differently.
Yes, yeah.
First of all.
Yes.
But second of all, I kind of had to step back and go when I was really heavily into the jingle thing. And I've never really had this conversation with you until we're in front of a microphone, evidently, because we had a lot of conversations about jingle writing. Mm-hmm. But and a lot of any success that I've had is due to the fact that we've had those conversations and we've done it a lot together, and I've learned so much. But I would feel, because that would happen, like I had other things where I'm like watching and I'm like, oh cool, there's a Hydroxycut commercial, there's a song that I did, or you know, whatever, and you're watching TV, and it's almost like a drug, and it's getting injected into your body and then it goes away until you get the next one.
Yeah.
Whereas when you get something that really matters to you and you hear it back, you're like, it's almost a satisfactory feeling of like, oh man, that's cool, like that piece of me found a home somewhere that is reaching other people and affecting other people, not trying to sell a product.
Yes.
I know that song, obviously you've told me the story about it and it meant something to you and it's your voice and you wrote it, but you were chasing somebody else's vision. How did that feeling come across when you heard it? Were you like, oh, that's cool?
Oh yeah, well I think there's not a lot of an emotion attached to the music.
Right on.
You know, it's a process.
But there had to be an emotion attached for it to come across through the speakers on the other side.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think that's the difference. Some people at some point thought just jingle music was just sort of, you know, happy chords and really light stuff and nondescript. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is, you know, but that's fine. But when you're going for, at that point, they were going for, you know, it was early part of them wanting to do songs, like having something that was more of it always has been Coke and all that kind of stuff, but it just, they were looking for something that was more of a song too, mm-hmm. as well, not just a piece of music that could be a bed underneath it, which then they did that after it. But yeah, there is emotional connection, but it's, I think if I had one of my own songs that I wrote and you know, even I've had songs cut by artists and that kind of thing, and that's really cool when you hear that. Yeah, would it be better if it was a full-length song, or you know, there was an emotional tune that you wrote and you had a different connection to it, and you're like, wow, that artist just did that. I can't believe how good that is, you know. Mm-hmm. And there are people like our songwriters here in Nashville. I mean, that must be an awesome, great feeling for them to, hear a tune that they've done and then listen to somebody do it really great. I know sometimes it's kind of the opposite. Sometimes the singers, the writers are just really great singers, and their versions are better than the artist's versions. But I don't think that happens a lot. I mean, it's more, hey, they wrote this song and now the producer took it to this level, and then the artist took it to the next level, and now they could say, hey, I got this hit. I like the fact that it was on TV. I never looked at it in a negative way, like me going to write jingles, or it was sort of born out of necessity, but it's also born out of it's professional. You're a professional.
Yeah.
You're a professional singer, guitar player, writer at that same time. Mm-hmm. So that was very satisfying, especially knowing, there was definitely a team involved with everything, and there was the editing, but there was, for the most part, it's what you created in the initial thing that stuck. And especially with the Good Life song, it was mostly all the stuff that was early that I created at my little home studio in Jersey City.
Which is another thing that you always say to me that sticks with me, which is first thought, best thought.
Yeah.
First thought, jingles. If anybody wants to write jingles, first thought, best thought.
Yeah.
Chase it.
Yeah. If you take everything in, like as much information as you can get,
mm-hmm.
I think.
Meaning from the ad agency.
From the ad agency. Yeah.
From everybody. Yeah. Totally.
And I feel like there was a little clarity about that. If I go back now, I remember there was a little synopsis of what they were looking for. Mm-hmm. It's like, Steers wants to be this and wants to be part of the American dream, and so you pull that little bit out of it, and again, that's just sort of taking that and running with it, and there was a lot of pieces of music that we did for that, even just in our thing. And I think it's just a matter of taking that energy and that emotion and just channeling it. And that's what I liked the most about it. And whenever you have a little bit of success, it always feeds the confidence level.
Of course.
So I had two there, and so this was the third one. I was like, this is fun. I like doing this. I'll do this for as long as I can, And we did for a little while, and it was gratifying. I guess, I don't know. Emotionally, I've always done my own music too. So, and I know for my tastes in that, it's not going to be commercial, So I would divide myself and I enjoyed the division of the commercial music and saying that that's my craft. Mm-hmm. And then I have this other person that wants to create something that's more, lack of a better word, artistic, just less commercial, something that you might want to listen to more than just once, or get it right on the first listen, something that you could evolve and listen to down the road, which is the records that I've really loved the most.
Yeah, and I want to talk about so I mean, fast forward to kind of what you're up to now. I want to talk about the juxtaposition of what you do as your day gig, yeah, versus this new record you put out, which I really want to talk about, because I think that it has a lot of pop tendencies in it and a lot of beautiful things in it. It's just obviously, pop is where pop is right now. So it is, again, it is what it is, but it does have, it's accessible, it's all that, but I think people would find your job that you do now really fascinating. I want to talk about that.
It's like my anonymous job. No.
Yeah, well, that's the drag about it, because you play stuff for me that you do, and literally, if you were to put that on YouTube, it would go viral in a second. My favorite one, so explain in your words what it is, and then I'll tell stories about some of the ones I've heard that I love.
Oh, geez. Well, I get. I always might as well tell the story, right? So, mm-hmm. I'd been in Nashville for a while and doing my demos and doing other artists' work, and I did a record myself too called From the Sleeve, and it was an emotional record that I had to do, which was great. And then the well starts drying up a bit. As far as having a studio, you try to figure out what you need to do. And at the time, I was doing my own record, maybe about 6-7 years ago or whatever, when I was doing that first thing. And
Nashville was very different back then.
It was very different. Yeah. It was very different. And I got a phone call from a buddy of mine who was at night he would mix these radio spots for he'd come in and just mix the stuff for that was done during the day. His name is Tim Donovan, fantastic mixer, fantastic artist as well. Great ears and just an awesome person. We used to hire. He was my engineer through a lot of jive stuff that we did. He knew his way around the SSL really well, and tangent on that, but he's great. So he's like, I got this opportunity. Maybe you'd be interested in. I couldn't really think of anybody else that would be able to do this. So and I was like, I'm kind of doing this thing right now, and I'm not quite ready. Well, fast forward 2 years later, it was kind of, I think I should do this.
Yeah.
Let me try it, because there was stuff that was drying up a bit here in town, and just changing, and just sort of, it wasn't where I wasn't kind of happy. The happiest, even though I loved recording guys and having, me working with you and all the other fine players that we did a lot of stuff with at that studio. So I was like, let's give it a shot. And okay, so fast forward, what it is basically we create parody content for radio stations. So it's very current things that are going on, and parody is just sort of comedic, funny takes on cultural events and things that are going on, in the news. And there are writers in New York, and I get the script and I have to produce it. So sometimes that's just doing a vocal track to a karaoke track, and we're fixing something like that. Or other times it's doing the entire track over.
Which there are not a lot of people on earth that can do it.
Well, yeah, and just go from rock to pop to jazz to we were getting some funny requests, like to do the Schoolhouse Rock themes, that don't, you have to just listen to the old tapes and just sort of have fun with the instrumentation and do as good a version of it as you can. And then there would be the script, and you'd sing along to that. So now you're having fun emulating the voices, and kind of got me back to when I was 15 or 14, and you wanted to try to sound like a certain artist, and you first learning songwriting, and you want to emulate that. So it can be really challenging, the job, and then it could also be really fun, because I've gotten my singing chops down. I've been singing every day. And it's all different, it could be like I sing a McCartney song, then maybe a Keith Urban or an Eric Church song or something, and then kind of go and do a ballad of I don't know, like heavy metal stuff, and scream into the microphone. So.
I've heard those. Yeah,
it runs the gamut, and I think for me at this time, it sort of pulls in my engineering chops, my mixing chops, my vocal chops, my playing chops, and it all has to be done that day.
Yeah.
It's not something you can spend a lot of time with.
Like hours, right?
Yeah, if I have to do something, thankfully I don't have to do the whole song. I can just do the intro, first verse, first pre, first chorus, maybe the outro, the pre-chorus, and then kind of go out. So I don't have to do the whole thing. Sometimes I do, and it's kind of fun. But it's just based. I know I got probably calls here as we're talking. Yeah, so I'll have to answer those later. But it's day-to-day based stuff. So it's sort of, you got your hands tied a little bit from what you need to do that day. But at least it's work that's always coming in, and I always kind of like that. I like with the jingle stuff. It was like I knew that somebody was going to say, "Hey, we got this. Let's try to do it." You're gonna, I'll throw you a couple $100 or $300 usually was a budget for back then. Now, like you said before, it's zero. Everybody's cattle calling. It's all free.
Yeah, sometimes you get to a level where you can get a little bit of money for sure.
Yeah. So I never know what the heck's going on, what I'm going to do that day, so that keeps you on your toes. Especially,
I love that it's like engineering wise. The part that I love about it is the fact that you, like, when I come over and you're like, "Hey man, I just grabbed this reverb from this 1970s track. It was on the left hand side, way up here," and it's like, listen on this in the snare. Like, I love seeing you get excited about the engineering aspect of it too. Yeah,
it is, and it's great. Like because it's radio, and they're just being played. They're not going to be. There are certain copyright things that fall into parody, so it's fine, and it's not being sold as a parody thing. So sometimes, like if I have to do a track, I'm always asking, is there original elements that I can use just so I can then build the song around it? So you can pull, say, maybe a drum groove, like say Sussudio, for lack of a better thing. You can pull the top of that off. You got the drum sound. Now it's just a matter of building the sequence and then sort of copy and paste it, and then maybe I can get that, but I have to do all the keyboard tracks over. And so that's fun. what keyboard were they using on that? What was the bass sound? You know, is it a combination of, you know, Matrix 12 or is it a JP 8 or a Prophet? And so I got into that because that's what I liked. Being sort of I'm a 70s kid, but I grew up listening to 80s music too. So it's that part is a challenge, and I love that part of it. I love that part of the gig, and you know I have to do the country songs too, and I'm always like, yeah, I could do a country track. That's great because it'll be a little easier. You know, it's not going to be as involved as some of the other things.
Like Bohemian Rhapsody. I remember.
Yeah, we did.
One.
Yeah, we did that for a college in I think it was Boise, and apparently the running back would take pickle juice before the games so he wouldn't cramp up, I guess. And I'm drawing a blank on his name. He played for the Dolphins for a little bit, and I think he's on Philly now. But yeah.
At least you only had to do that once.
But we had to do it once.
Track now.
yeah, and then all the vocal things, and that's the awesome thing. It sort of gives, this job is giving me the ability to kind of go back on that stuff and listen to how unbelievable it was done, you know. And if you pick apart in headphones each vocal harmony and you try to follow it, you know, musically, especially stuff like Queen and you know Freddie's stuff, and there's plenty of other really clever things that I get a chance to sort of emulate and copy, but it's an education. It's really what it boils down to.
It's obvious that that's a thing that you are picking up on, because on your new record, Under the Sun, it's very different than anything else that I've ever heard you do personally. And I think the thing, we've talked about it before, but the thing about it that you're doing on this record is tons and tons of vocal layering. Yeah. And I mean, I didn't know that this gig is kind of pushed into that, and that kind of brought maybe that part of out of you and your creative process. A little bit, I think. I think you introduced me to some artists like Bon Iver and a couple other artists that are really having fun vocally, you know, with that. And I just wanted to sort of touch on it, not really get too wrapped up on it, but I'm definitely utilizing tools to have fun, to try to give the vocal thing a little bit of a character or something. You know, that would kind of lend itself for that. And yeah, there's some stacked interesting harmony things, and I get that from my English bands that I love so much. I was going to say, let's talk about Elbow for a second. Yeah, Elbow, the way that they've kind of influenced you. Oh, absolutely. I think they're the most unknown band in America with the most success outside of America, I feel. I mean, I try to introduce, I'm even wearing like Elbow. Takeoff and landing of everything t-shirt right now. I sort of like try to be their little bit of their spokesperson here in the South. But yeah, their taste just matches with what my aesthetic that I like the most. Yeah, I feel like that's any group, any artist that you admire and that you care about. It's generally because they sort of line up with your aesthetic and your taste, and maybe you'll probably find that there's common people that you've been influenced by. I mean, they were all in their early 40s, I think, or around 40, early 40s. But for me, their aesthetic is, the initial one that I liked is some Peter Gabriel, early Genesis. You know, there's definitely some English pop stuff, and Guy Garvey is just a quintessential poet. I definitely would love for people to listen to how he crafts his lyric and how good it is. Again, it's not pop, but they have a couple pop songs. That band, I would say, to sum them up, would be it's a longer payoff for sure. Yeah, and they're very well respected, and especially in England and in Europe and that kind of thing, and people know about them, I think, here. But it's their catalog too. Like I've always been slow to. I feel like I've always kind of been slow for new music. Like I don't run off the gate. Like there was always be people or friends that you knew that were always on the cutting edge of new music. Like, oh, you should listen to this. It's brand new. I've always been slow to that. Maybe it's just my own cautious behavior of like waiting to say, okay, that's established a little bit more. I don't know how to describe it, but I've never been one to go out and reach out to find new music, which makes now just very daunting to me. Like there's so much music out there. You know, there's no real liver. I mean, there's no filter. Oh, man,
as much, you know.
I go
So
on Spotify on Fridays and I'm just inundated with stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and all I'm doing now, because there's so much stuff, because I want to find a new record to love, you know. And I've found some beautiful records that way.
yeah, you've shared a bunch of great stuff with me.
Well,
yeah.
it's tough. I mean, you hit play and it's like you hope that first song catches you or something, because you got to invest in 100 other ones to try to find some good stuff, you know. And you're at the mercy of. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing because. I mean, I'm complaining. There's too much music to listen to. What's wrong with me? But I think it's a beautiful thing. Like the industry. I mean, like a Buddha Head wouldn't get shelved now. Like going back to like some of those some of those records that you made.
Yeah, true.
Would actually get to see the light of day.
Yeah.
And have their day in the sun to compete against a major label. And you know, like
That's a
if
good
you
point.
look at like a Meghan Trainor, you know, comes out with this all about that bass and all this, and it, as an indie, and it's just like it's this huge thing that might have never happened had it been early 90s, you know,
Yeah.
80s. So I think it's a beautiful thing, but again, there's a lot out there and there's a lot of good and bad, but good and bad doesn't matter. It's whatever kind of catches on and what you love. So like for you, for instance, I know we've had this conversation. You have this record, Under the Sun, out, and it can be it's your thing. You made a website by yourself and you put it up online and you sold it, and now you are the beacon for this record, and however you choose to advertise it,
Exactly.
it's under your control.
Yes.
You know, and I think that that's a beautiful thing, and it also can take you away from the music as well too, because you're focusing on other things. So there's a balance there. But yeah, I love it. I mean, you made the album cover and it looks great.
Yeah, thanks.
You know, and you
well,
did it all
actually,
in the
Shep
house.
Toscala did. Yeah.
Oh, did he?
Shep
Okay,
Toscala.
I
Yeah,
thought
he's
you had
from
done that. I'm sorry.
Well, he's my alter ego. My
Yeah.
photography.
Oh,
my
I'm
photography. No, just kidding. No, Shep Toscala. Yeah, he's from McLaren Vale in South Australia.
Nice.
No, yeah. The picture is from South Australia, and it's Silver Sands Beach, I think it's called. Yeah,
So,
and it's from McLaren Vale.
Did you? How long? I mean, these songs are pretty new.
Yeah, they were beds of music. I think sometimes the way I'd always liked creating is like, yeah, they're little pieces of music that kind of hung around for a little bit, but it was always the lyric that needed to be finished. So I have a wonderful
Favorite part.
I have a wonderful girlfriend, Stacy, and she's from Australia, and we, you know, a lot of the stuff is kind of based about going back and forth, and early in our relationship as well, and going to Boston because where she lived here, and some of it all came from a lot of free form writing and poet writing, I guess, or just that stream of conscious writing that you do, like you find in the Artist's Way book and a couple other things where it doesn't matter what you write, you just write. And I always found that writing on an airplane kind of was
Interesting. I feel the same way.
really
Yeah,
just, I don't know if it's the pressure or whatever, you know, or the fact that you want to kill time and do something creative or whatever.
I think to me,
something.
it's nostalgia. You're going from one place to another place.
Interesting,
And
yeah.
you're in a place of uncertainty. And I think it allows you to lift, to allow all the ego part of your brain that's making you think about what you're having for dinner. It's allowing space for that's just my take.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm the exact same way. I've written some of my songs just on a napkin in an airplane for sure.
Yeah, totally. I like.
That's just my take on it. Yeah.
I think it's great. Yeah, I feel like there's a freeing aspect of it, and maybe it.
Or it could be
It's
just
altitude.
the air.
It's just altitude. Like maybe the altitude. It's like this could be my last thing. Who knows? I'm just gonna write it.
Put
Maybe
something in the air that we don't know about.
Yeah,
That's
maybe they
causing-
do. Maybe they do. But yeah, always the airplane was that. So I just wrote a bunch of stuff down and then edit later. You know, just kind of figure it out. It doesn't even. Some of it was really, you know, just observational, and I think some of the best songwriters are just do things based on observation, and they describe things. But they were definitely threads of going back and forth to Boston, and then experiences, and trying to put those experiences into a form of poetry that works. And I just want to keep getting better at this. And somebody like Guy Garvey from Elbow just does it because a lot of his songs are about his hometown and just about his experiences and just how he creates the vision and the feeling of his hometown and how important his friends are and all that kind of stuff really kind of I aspire to be some form of that, or try to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
tying this whole thing back, Chapin was an incredible lyricist. I mean, just an amazing songwriter, storyteller.
It sounds like he was quite an observer as a human.
Very much an observer, and and he had almost free license in a lot of ways. He wasn't had to be stuck in certain things, which I think is great. But just incredibly prolific. I never had that gift of writing lyrics. It's always been a little bit more difficult for me.
It's a rare thing to find in people. It's
the
hardest thing to come.
And not just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no.
I feel like not just writing, songs, but just writing kind of things that will matter, that are a little bit deeper than just writing craft music.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, that's just.
Why do you think
that's
it
part
is?
of my thing.
I mean, you can sit down and comparing a jingle. I mean, you can sit down to Good Life. I mean, you can come up with a bazillion lines for that. You know? And obviously they have to not be cheesy and they have to work, because that's the trick in that situation.
Definitely.
But why is it harder to go deeper into like one or two levels down to find something?
I think it's the layers in songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
I think the really good ones. I mean, John Prine's amazing at it.
Mm-hmm.
He could write the most simple words, but it's the meaning behind those words and how he ties all of those basic simple words together. And he gets, and sometimes a writer like that might be like, what? Did he just compare that to that? And it feels a little bit random, a little freeform, and it may be, but it still makes you think.
Yeah.
And it's still like, how does that line tie in with that line? Oh, kind of does that. I wish I had more examples to think about right now. But when that moment happens, I love it as a songwriter, as a fan of songwriting.
Yeah.
I love when that little mystery. There is a line that guy has, and from Elbow, it's like, and I tie that little mystery on your tongue or something. I've broken bones protecting laws that keep you free, and he's not just talking about himself. He's just sort of an entity.
Mm-hmm.
I made your day, so take a seat by me, type of thing. I don't know. That's one little thing, but it's always some form of, I enjoy the poetry and not so much the directness. So it's a form of a layer. That's going to be.
This town is very literal. Everything is very direct.
Pretty much, yeah. There aren't too many that are going that far, but some of the songwriters do. You just don't hear the songs.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
To the radio.
Yeah, they won't make it. There's got to be a million songs in the vaults, that are fantastic,
just
pieces.
Brilliant.
And they, they won't see it. They won't see live. And every once in a while, one comes up and it's like, yeah, this is cool. Mm-hmm. But it's still not really as poetic as like the things that I just turned 50, I guess, and so that's an interesting thing. And I feel like you're still young enough to do a bunch of stuff. You got some wisdom in front of you, behind you and built up, and be able to use that in the future. And I think for me, I want to just be a better layered lyricist. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of hard when you don't read a lot. But a meeting, I'd love to meet some more people that would challenge me on that too as well. Yeah. Because I understand it and the appreciation for it is there. Yeah. But then the execution is, you got to just go for it, do it. Well, so I try to do that with Undersung.
There's some beautiful lyrics on there. Definitely some journeys for sure. I can hear. But it also has an idea that you can interpret it as you could interpret it towards your life as well. Mm-hmm. Like it's not a, I mean, because I know you well, I hear where some things come from, but it's also like you can detach from it and really ingest it and be like, wow. And obviously the production on it's brilliant.
Oh, thanks. So. It's different for each little tune. They go into little journeys, and I just had fun sometimes with sound, and then keeping the chord changes really basic and simple, not going too crazy with that. You say
basic, but there are some left turns that you don't normally
I guess so,
take.
But
there's some non-Paul Umbach left turns for sure. I mean, especially some of the choruses, like they're very English for sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have like a brightness to them, but still the production is. I feel like the production overall is a dark kind of sound, but then your chords have this very bright way of being, and then obviously the lyrics are. It's almost. I just never heard you do anything like it before. I mean, the melodies open up more so in the choruses than I've ever heard you do before, where your verses are very simple,
Yeah.
and you just allow things to just kind of explode. And I think that's cool. Like there's highs and lows. It's almost classical in a way, the highs and lows of the record, compared to some of your other stuff, which is more just singer-songwriter,
Yeah.
straight ahead, kind of here's a drum groove, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a beautiful departure, you know, from what you've typically done. So.
And you're playing sax on the first song, which is awesome. You did a fantastic,
Thank you.
lovely job. Always
That
have
was
to have you play soprano on a song, which is
That doesn't
great.
happen very often
Yeah.
in this town. Soprano saxophone is not required very often, but anytime I get to do it, I'm very thankful that I get an opportunity to do it.
Well, it's not a guilty pleasure, but it's sort of background music that we have a lot at the house on. We definitely listen to. There's a station out in Santa Rosa, I guess it is, but they're out of Sebastopol, California. It's called KJZY, and we stream that, and it's basically smooth jazz, but they throw in like Sinatra, and they throw in a bunch of other things, and some Jamie Cullum, who I think is fantastic
James
too.
Gray, yeah.
So it's not just all guitar, piano, saxophone tracks, but there's tons of that. So it just that kind of music is if it's in your house or if it's around, there's going to be some influence that's going to come into play on records or things that you create. The things that I'm creating.
Especially
so,
if you're open to it, and that's part of who you are,
And it really is like you said before. I mean, I have my day job, and it's in music, and it's wonderful, and it's a blast, and I'm having a great time with it, and I get the chance to meet some really great singers too, and I'll have to give shout outs to Joanna Janae and Cherie Oakley, and they're fantastic and great people, and they come in and do some stuff for me, and they have a fun time with it. And there's Travis Lamb, who's a great singer too, and so we have fun in the studio. And
Yeah, of course.
Kevin Brinsfield, you have to do do more for me. So
Yeah.
maybe
Anytime.
got to sing like a little bit more.
Yeah, a little country. The Canadian people are worried about me. They're probably listening to me talk now and go, "What happened to this guy?" Yeah, but
it's good. And they're great people, so I do get a chance to do that, and then I get free carte blanche because, like you said, we can do this. You can release something. It just depends on how much money you have to spend to promote it. But at least to get it out there is definitely it feels good, as a creator.
And if you build your infrastructure, and you learn the elements of it, you can make a beautiful sounding thing with not a lot of money.
Oh yeah,
it's really incredible. And but you've made a really beautiful thing with lots of really incredible gear and years and years and years of knowledge. That also comes forward too.
Thanks. So. We keep working on it. I want to keep doing it. This collection, it was only 6 songs. I might have had one other one that I could have matched it, but I had about another 6 that I'm like, do I want that all to be one collection? That's really going to be confusing.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is hence the color and the blueness. It's a very open, freeing sort of record. I think there's some obviously pop elements that's there. It's not completely new age or anything like that, but it's definitely different. It's not. But there's a more openness to it and a little bit more. And the beach and.
Oh, there's a soaring element to it.
Yeah.
I feel like a bird soaring when I listen to it. Like it definitely feels that energy.
And that goes back to when I started listening to music. I wanted it to mimic what was going on, in the sound of the lyric, or just put you in a place that get you into a feeling, into a zone. Mm-hmm. I hope that's what comes across, as well as still being accessible pop, and I think that's a journey too. I just want to keep doing that stuff. Yeah. I have a little more politically driven songs, and I was like, those don't go together.
Yeah, there's a lightness to the record that would have definitely been a red herring sitting there.
Yeah.
There's a lightness to it.
Under the Sun touches a a little bit on some of that. It just sort of.
But the music above it is, you can fool. That's my favorite thing is you can fool people with that, and that's what you've done. It's like you have this lightness, but you're allowed the lyrics to be a little heavier. Yeah,
a little bit more, sort of message, and that was, that was just a fun song to kind of put together, and very, I guess, Beatle-y driven,
totally,
maybe a little super trampy kind of thing, but.
So how do people find it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I got it. My I guess it's paulumbachmusic.com.
Paul Umbach Music.
Yeah,
and you can Umbach.
Yeah, I figured it's a tough name sometimes to say. To people who Paul Umbach. Well, what's it's something I've had to live with for 50 years.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of my name, but it kind of it's always been tough. It's not like Joe Smith or
Hey, every name has a problem. Summers, always spelled wrong and always missing the S. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
We
a
all have-
plight.
Yeah, exactly. But some people have really fantastic names,
They
and
do.
I really do think that helps their career.
For sure, yeah. Totally agree.
There's part of that, But yeah, I mean, it's on iTunes, and my other record I did many years ago, From a Sleeve, is also on iTunes and Spotify and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you get a chance and you want to go into a different zone and take a listen and tell me what you think about it.
And where do they find you on social media? Is it Paul Umbach Music on Instagram?
I think it's all just Paul Umbach.
Paul
yeah.
Umbach
yeah.
on Instagram. Okay.
Instagram, yeah.
Cool.
Which, you've been very helpful in trying to get me to post more and
man.
trying to do, but it's, it's.
Every time you do, people want to hear from you, man.
No, I appreciate that.
They miss you.
Yeah. I guess
what's
sometimes.
Paul up to these days?
Yeah.
Because they can't pick up the phone. They go on Facebook and go, "What's Paul up to?" Instead of going, "Hey, Paul, how are you?"
Oh, I'd love that if that was the case.
Doing?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore.
I get a chance, which is nice. So, though sometimes I do, get some phone calls from people that I've worked with in the past, and I had a nice one a couple of weeks ago, and it just affirms your what you've gone through in your career, or what I've gone through in my career, and it was just nice to hear the kind words, and it's just nice to hear the other words too. But sometimes they don't get said, No, but it was cool. It was cool. Somebody I'd worked with went on my 4-track, back in 90. No, geez, probably 89. 88, 89. I did a lot of recording in 88, 89. And that's what I definitely want to release these.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? What the heck?
I mean, that's the thing we talked about. It's so easy. It's
Yeah.
so simple. And you just did it yourself and you saw how simple it is. And it's,
Yeah.
to get your music out there, it's just so simple.
It is.
And you are your brand. You are the example, and you are the spokesperson for it. And however you choose to be,
Yeah.
that's it. You can just put it out and just be happy with that, or you can put some effort into it or send it places. That's just the thing that that's the thing that every artist that you talk with, it's just like, just put the damn stuff out there.
Yeah.
If you have it there, even if it's not accepted, it'll find. Like, I used an example recently. I had a conversation with somebody who's kind of down in the dumps because a couple of labels have said no,
Yeah.
And I used the example of a track that you and I did probably 8 years ago, that kind of jangly acoustic track.
Yeah, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, 9 years later, it finds a home, and all of a sudden, we're getting a check.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, it's just out there. Just get it out there and just see what happens.
Yeah.
As long as you do the best you can and capture that snapshot in that time and put it out, and as long as you just don't let it sit there.
Yeah.
And that's a good example. 9 years later, it found a home. And it was a nice home.
Yeah,
it was a nice check.
It was a great check, yeah.
And it was a surprise. You never know.
It was a definite nice surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's awesome, man.
It's a good point.
I'm super excited for the record, and
Thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your story.
There's a few of them, yeah. And I hope to share more as we continue on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good
Thank
stuff.
you.
Thanks, Tyler.
Watch this heavy heart of mine turn this water into wine. Light your match and let it glow, so I know my way home. One more game of tic-tac-toe. You be X and I'll be you. Fall in love like dominoes, then I'll come back home. If I can't find you, go get lost in the simple things. Might I remind you, chase your tail and dream those dreams. One more glass to set me free. Forget right past what's in front of me. I'll be fine, they tell me so, 'cause I know my way home.